There is a powerful kind of man who does not raise his voice when he is angry. He doesn't need to. Dominic Ren was that kind of man. In a city that ran on noise, sirens, arguments, the endless percussion of money changing hands in wrong places, Dominic moved through it all in a silence that people learned, quickly, to be afraid of. He never threatened twice. He never chased. He simply waited and collected, and the city understood that the waiting was the worst part. This is not his story, not entirely. This is the story of two boys who grew up in the shadow of what he did one Tuesday evening in March. Boys who were too young to remember it and too marked by it to ever move on. Boys who were a father they didn't know wasn't theirs. Raised on a love they didn't know was borrowed, and pointed toward a future that was quietly built on top of a grave. Their names were Kael and Eren. They were twins, identical in face, opposite in fire. From the outside, they looked like two versions of the same person, same dark eyes, same sharp jaw, same silence that arrived before they spoke. But anyone who spent more than 10 minutes with both of them understood that the resemblance was mostly surface. Kael carried something coiled in him, something that never fully rested. Eren carried the same weight differently, slower, deeper, the way a river holds a stone. They were 2 years old when everything that mattered happened. They were 25 before they understood what it was. In between those 2 points is a story about debt, about the price of a secret held for 23 years, about a man named Solomon who was sent to deceive 2 boys and somewhere along the way forgot how to leave. About a boy who walked into a Mafia boss's territory at 11 years old with a kitchen knife and walked out with one less hand and a rage that didn't dim. It just learned patience. It is also underneath all of it a story about what a father is, not by blood, not by assignment, but by the 1,000 quiet choices made across 2 decades, the blocked doorways, the bandaged wounds, the sleepless nights, the words swallowed so that 2 boys could sleep soundly in a house built on lies told for reasons that were complicated and human, and not entirely without love. You will have to decide for yourself whether that counts for anything. By the end, so will they. The debt was not new. It had existed for 6 years before anyone died because of it. 6 years of extensions, renegotiations, and the particular humiliation of a man who kept promising next month with less and less conviction each time. Marcus Vale was not a bad man. He was simply a man who had made one desperate decision in a desperate season and had been paying the interest ever since. He had borrowed from Dominic Ren when his wife, Ada, was sick and the hospital bills were eating through everything they had built. He had borrowed a significant sum with the full intention of repaying it. The business he invested it in failed within 8 months. What followed were 6 years of smaller payments, apologetic phone calls, and the creeping dread of a man who understood slowly that the hole beneath him was deeper than he'd realized. Dominic gave him more time than most people would have expected. That was the thing about Dominic that people misunderstood. He was not impulsive. He was not cruel for the pleasure of it. He was methodical in the way that made him far more dangerous than a cruel man. Because cruelty could be predicted, appealed to, occasionally softened. Dominic's decisions came from a place beyond emotion. They came from arithmetic. Marcus had run out of numbers. It was a Tuesday evening in March when they came. Ada was in the kitchen. Kael and Eren were on the living room floor, 2 years old, unremarkable in their smallness, absorbed in the private language of twins, who haven't yet learned that the world has edges. Marcus opened the door before they knocked. He had been expecting it. What happened next took 11 minutes. Ada died first. Not because Dominic wanted her to, but because she stepped forward when she should have stepped back, and one of Dominic's men made a decision Dominic had not authorized. There was a single moment where Dominic looked at the man who had done it with an expression that promised a separate conversation later. Then he returned his attention to Marcus without changing his posture. Marcus did not fight. He looked once at his boys on the floor, Kael chewing on a plastic block, Eren watching the door with those old, quiet eyes, and then he looked at Dominic and said something that no one in that room expected. He said, "I know something about you, something you've buried. Let me write it down and you'll never see it, or kill me and spend the rest of your life wondering who else I told." The room went still. Dominic studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded once, and Marcus was taken from the house alive. He was dead before midnight, but not before he wrote something down and placed it somewhere Dominic never found. The boys were left in the house alone for 3 hours before Dominic returned. He stood in the doorway and looked at them for a long time. Kael had fallen asleep. Eren was still awake, watching him with an expression no 2-year-old should have owned. Dominic made a phone call. "Solomon," he said. "I have a job." What Marcus had whispered to Dominic in those final hours, that secret, that buried thing, would not surface for another 23 years. But it was already in motion. It had always been in motion. Some debts outlive the people who owe them. Solomon arrived on a Wednesday. He came with a single bag, a covered casserole dish he'd bought from a woman 3 streets over, and the specific expression of a man performing normalcy under considerable pressure. He told the neighbors he was a cousin of Marcus, distant but willing. The neighbors accepted this because people generally accept this explanation costs them the least effort, and a man stepping in to care for 2 motherless toddlers was easier to believe than to question. He was not warm at first. He was present, which was different. He fed them, bathed them, kept the lights on and the house from falling into the particular chaos that uncared-for spaces collapse into. He did what was required. Love, if it came at all, would come later. It came faster than he expected. By the time the boys were 5, Solomon had stopped thinking of the assignment every morning. By the time they were 8, he had stopped thinking of it most days entirely. He helped Kael with the stubbornness of long division. He taught Eren to cook simple things, eggs, rice, the kind of food that becomes comfort memory. He attended school events. He argued with them about bedtimes. He became, without fully authorizing it in himself, a father. He also became, without knowing it, a secret with legs, because the city talked. Not loudly. Not in ways that reach Solomon's careful ears, but in the particular murmur that moves through neighborhoods where people have long memories and short distances between houses. Someone always knew someone who had been there, or heard from someone who had. The name Dominic Ren attached itself to the story of Marcus and Ada Vale, the way rust attaches to iron, gradually, completely, with intention of releasing. Kael heard it at 9. A fragment, half a conversation between 2 older boys in his schoolyard, who stopped talking when they noticed him listening. He filed it away with the particular patience of a child who has learned that adults hide the important things. He heard more at 10. Enough to assemble a shape, if not the full picture. By 11, he had heard enough. He did not tell Eren, he did not tell Solomon. He went to the kitchen at 11:30 on a school night, took the longest knife from the second drawer, wrapped it in a cloth the way he had seen in a film, and walked out of the house in the dark. He knew where Dominic operated. The city had told him that too. What happened when he arrived lasted less than 4 minutes. Kael got further than anyone expected a child to get, which said more about his nerve than his planning. He reached the 2nd floor of the building before 2 men caught him. He fought with the desperate, graceless fury of someone who had been angry for 9 years and finally found somewhere to put it. Dominic was called down. He looked at Kael the way a man looks at something that surprises him without quite moving him. He crouched to eye level, which Kael would remember later as the most unsettling part. That deliberate lowering, that performance of patience, and asked him one question. "Whose boy are you?" Kael told him exactly whose boy he was. Dominic stood. He was quiet for a moment, then he said to the men holding Kael, "The left hand, clean cut. Then take him home." He was back in his chair before it was done. Solomon was awake when they brought Kael to the door. He did not ask who had done it. He simply took Kael inside, sat him on the kitchen counter, and dressed the wound with a steadiness that Kael, through the shock and the pain, would never quite forget. His hands did not shake. His face did not collapse. He worked in silence until it was done, and then he held Kael's face in both hands and looked at him for a long time without speaking. Then he said, "Not yet! Don't not, it's dangerous not, he'll kill you, not yet." Kael heard it. Filed that away too. Eren found out the next morning. He sat beside Kael on the bed and did not speak for several minutes. Then he asked only one question. Not about Dominic, not about the hand. Why didn't you take me with you? Kael had no answer for that. He still doesn't. And Solomon, in the kitchen below them, stood at the window with his coffee cooling in his hand, looking at nothing, carrying the weight of a secret that had just become considerably heavier. He had known, of course, from the beginning. He had known and said nothing, and fed them eggs and helped with long division and attended school events and become something real inside a lie. And now a boy was upstairs with one hand because of a silence Solomon had chosen to keep. Not yet, he had said. The question he hadn't answered, not to Kael, not to himself, was what came after. Yet if you think Solomon is guilty, comment the lie. If you think he did what he had to do, comment the love. Let's see where this audience stands before everything falls apart. The first time Kael tried to go back, he was 14. He had spent 3 years building himself quietly, running in the mornings before the house woke up, training with older boys in the neighborhood who asked few questions, learning to compensate for the missing hand with a ferocity of focus that made his right side twice as capable as most people's too. He had grown angular and serious, the softness of childhood burned off by something that had no name but occupied him completely. He had also, in those 3 years, learned more about Dominic Eren. Not from Solomon. Solomon offered nothing, deflected everything, changed the subject with a smoothness that Kael had stopped finding subtle. But the city was generous with its whispers to those who listened carefully. Kael knew Dominic's patterns, his locations, the rotation of the men around him. He had drawn it all in a notebook he kept beneath a loose floorboard in his bedroom. A document of obsession assembled by a 14-year-old who had taught himself to be patient without being peaceful. He left on a Friday night with the notebook, a plan, and considerably more preparation than the last time. He made it 4 streets before Solomon stepped out of the shadows ahead of him. Kael stopped. Solomon looked at him, at the bag, at the set of his jaw, at the 3 years of quiet preparation written all over him, and said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "Come inside." Sell. Solomon didn't move. He stood in the middle of the street in his house slippers and his faded jacket with his arms at his sides and his face carrying that expression Kael had never been able to fully decode. Not fear, not anger, something older and more complicated than either. "You're not ready," Solomon said. "You don't know what I am." "I know exactly what you are," Solomon said quietly. "That's why I'm standing here." Kael went back inside. Not because Solomon had convinced him of anything. Because something in those last words had snagged on a question he couldn't yet form, and unanswered questions had always been the one thing capable of slowing him down. He didn't stop preparing. He just stopped telling Solomon when. At 17, the attempt was more sophisticated, and the interception more remarkable. Kael had told no one, not Eren, not the older boys, not a single person who could have warned Solomon. He had changed his route, his timing, his method entirely. He had spent 2 months creating the appearance of a boy who had, if not made peace, at least made distance from his obsession. He ate dinner without the old tension. He laughed occasionally. He let Solomon believe the frequency of the conflict had reduced. It had not reduced. It had gone underground. He left at 3 in the morning on a Thursday through the back window. Solomon was sitting on the back step. Kael stood in the window frame for a long moment looking down at him. Solomon didn't turn around. He was holding 2 cups of tea and he set one on the step beside him, without a word. Kael came down and sat beside him, and they drank the tea in silence for several minutes. Finally, Kael said, "How?" Not a question, an exhausted statement. Solomon wrapped both hands around his cup. "Because I know you," he said. "Better than you think. Better, maybe, than anyone should know a person they've only had 17 years with." Something about the phrasing landed strangely. Only 17 years, as though there were another measure Solomon was comparing it to. Kael filed it away, said nothing. "Is there anything you want to tell me?" Kael asked instead. Solomon was quiet for a long time, long enough that the question hung in the cold air between them and grew heavier. "Not yet," he said, the same 2 words. Again. Kael stood, left the tea half finished, and went back inside. Eren was awake in the hallway, leaning against the wall with his arms folded, watching. "He did it again," Eren said. "Yes. One day you're going to have to ask him the right question." "What's the right question?" Eren looked at him steadily. "Not why he keeps stopping you. Why he keeps saying not yet instead of never." Kael looked at his brother for a long moment. It was the most important thing anyone said to him in those 14 years. And he didn't fully understand it until he was standing in a room with Dominic bleeding at his feet. The attempts at 20 and 22 were stopped differently. Not by Solomon appearing from shadows or waiting on steps. By then, Kael was too skilled for those interceptions to work, and all three of them knew it. They were stopped by conversation. Long, difficult, circling conversations that Solomon steered with the patience of a man who had been preparing for them, in which he said enough to slow Kael down without saying the thing that would have broken everything open. He confirmed that he knew more than he'd shared. He admitted, carefully, that the situation was more complicated than Kael understood. He said, once, in a moment that slipped out before he caught it, "There are things Dominic is afraid of. You can't use them if you're dead." Kael went completely still. "What things?" Solomon closed his eyes briefly, the expression of a man who had just said 4 words too many. "Come back inside," he said. Not yet. But by 22, Eren had begun to understand that Solomon's "not yet" was not stalling. It was a countdown. They were 25 when Solomon stopped coming to the door entirely. Kael found him in the kitchen. On the morning they had decided to move, sitting at the table with his hands folded, and his eyes carrying 23 years of something that had finally reached its edge. Kael stood in the doorway. Solomon looked up at him and said, "There's something I need you to find when this is over. Something your father left behind." Kael's jaw tightened at the word. Father Solomon held his gaze and did not correct himself. "Come back alive," he said. "Both of you." He stood, gripped Kael's right hand briefly in both of his, and walked out of the kitchen. Kael stood there for a long moment in the silence, looking at the table where Solomon had been seated. There was a folded piece of paper where his hands had rested. Kael picked it up, opened it. It was an address, not Dominic's address. He already had that, a different one. Somewhere on the east side of the city, in a neighborhood Kael didn't recognize, written in Solomon's careful handwriting beneath 3 words that made very little sense to him in that moment. For after. Not before he folded it and put it in his pocket and went to find Eren. He did not show Eren the note. Not yet. They moved on a Thursday. Not because Thursday carried any particular significance, but because Kael had learned. Over 14 years of watching and mapping and rebuilding his knowledge every time Dominic shifted his operations. That Thursday evenings were the quietest. The outer ring of men reduced. The building settled into a rhythm that was closer to administrative than defensive. It was the one night of the week when Dominic Eren allowed himself something resembling rest. It was, Kael had decided, the courteous night to come. They went in with 2 other men. Quiet professionals Eren had sourced through connections built over years of careful relationship. Men who understood the assignment and had no interest in the story behind it. They were there for access and containment. The confrontation itself belonged to the brothers. The building was a converted warehouse on the city's west edge. 4 floors, functional, stripped of anything decorative except the top floor where Dominic had always kept his office. Kael had been inside it once before, briefly and badly at 11 years old. He remembered the smell of it, something between concrete and expensive wood. He remembered the ceiling being higher than expected. He remembered Dominic crouching to eye level. They cleared the first 2 floors in under 20 minutes. Dominic's remaining men were competent, but not prepared for the specific combination of Kael's cold precision and Eren's ability to anticipate movement before it happened. A twin's fluency, the language of 2 people who had shared every formative experience and knew each other's instincts the way most people only knew their own. The 3rd floor took longer. Kael took a cut across his right forearm, his good arm, from a man who was faster than expected. He registered, wrapped it against his body, and kept moving. Eren saw it happen and said nothing. They had agreed beforehand. Injuries below a certain threshold did not exist until after. By the time they reached the 4th floor, the building was theirs. Dominic was sitting at his desk. Not cornered against a wall, not attempting an exit, sitting, with his hands visible on the surface in front of him, and the particular stillness of a man who had heard everything happening below and made a decision about how to meet it. He was 67 years old, and he looked it. Smaller than the architecture of fear around his name suggested. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed even at this hour in a dark jacket that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His eyes were exactly as Kael remembered them, clear, assessing, carrying no surprise whatsoever. I wondered which year it would be, Dominic said. His voice was the same too, quiet, unhurried, the voice of a man in a room he still considered as regardless who else was standing in it. I had money on 23. You held out longer than I expected. Neither brother spoke. Dominic looked at Kael's left arm, the one that ended below the wrist, with an expression that was not quite guilt and not quite indifference. Something in between that had no clean name. That was necessary, he said. It wasn't, Kael said. You would have come back the following week. I came back anyway. Yes, Dominic said. You did. Something moved briefly as his expression. Not admiration exactly, but its distant cousin. Sit down. We're not sitting, Eren said. Dominic looked at Eren for the first time with an attention that suggested he found him the more interesting variable. He studied him for a moment, the way people study things they have been thinking about from a distance for a long time. You have your mother's mouth, he said quietly. The temperature in the room dropped. Eren moved first, not with the explosive fury Dominic might have expected, but with a swift, decisive efficiency that had Dominic's right hand pinned to the desk before the older man had fully processed the movement. Kael was beside him a half-second later, and then it was done. Dominic subdued, contained, stripped of the small weapon he kept in the desk drawer that Kael had known about for 11 years. It took less time than the conversation had. Dominic did not struggle. He allowed it with the composure of a man completing a transaction he had long since mentally signed. Kael stood over him. In the 14 years he had spent building toward this moment, he had imagined it many ways. He had imagined it cold, and he had imagined it loud, and he had imagined several versions in between. What he had not imagined was how ordinary it would feel. How the room would remain just a room. How Dominic would remain just a man. How the enormous gravitational weight of 23 years of purpose would arrive at its destination and feel in the final moment strangely quiet. He raised the weapon. Dominic looked up at him without flinching and said, "Before you do that." "Don't," Kael said. "Your father is dead. I know my father is dead. You killed him." "Yes," Dominic said. "I did. I killed Marcus Vale on a Tuesday evening in March, and I have known every day since that this moment was coming." He paused. "That is not what I mean." Kael's hand did not lower, but something in his face shifted, a fraction, barely visible, the kind of movement that only Eren would have caught. Eren caught it. "Say it plainly," Eren said. Dominic looked between them. Something in his expression had changed, the administrative way to something older and more human underneath. The face of a man finally setting down something he had carried too long. "The man who raised you," he said. "Solomon." "What about him?" Kael said. His voice was very flat. "I sent him," Dominic said. "He is not your father. He never was. I took your real father from you and I put another man in his place, and for 23 years that man has been living a lie I constructed." He held Kael's gaze steadily. "I thought you should know that before you decide anything." The room was completely silent. Kael's arm was still raised. Eren had gone very still beside him. Not the stillness of shock, but the stillness of a person rapidly reassembling a picture they thought they understood, and finding the pieces no longer fit the frame. "You're lying," Kael said. "I'm not," Dominic said simply. "I have never needed to lie to you. I had Solomon for that." Kael looked at his brother. Eren was already reaching for his phone. Solomon arrived 18 minutes after Eren's text. Not because he lived 18 minutes away. He lived 7 minutes away. Had lived 7 minutes away for the past 11 years. Close enough to respond, but far enough to maintain the appearance of a separate life. The extra 11 minutes were because he sat in his car outside his building after reading the text, and did something Kael would never have believed if he'd witnessed it. he prayed. Not elaborately, not at length. Just a quiet, eyes-closed conversation with whatever he believed was listening. The kind of prayer that doesn't ask for anything specific because the person praying has accepted that the shape of the next hour is no longer negotiable. He was asking, if anything, for the right words. He had prepared words. He had been preparing them in various configurations for 23 years. He already knew he wouldn't use them. He drove to the building. Identified himself to the men on the lower floors who looked at him with a particular wariness of people who don't know where to categorize someone. Took the stairs to the 4th floor because the idea of arriving in an elevator felt wrong, too sudden, too mechanical for something that deserved the weight of steps. He came through the door and stopped. Kael was standing with his back to the entrance. Eren was to the left, arms folded, watching the door. He had positioned himself to see Solomon arrive, which meant he had thought about this moment before texting, had wanted to see Solomon's face before Solomon saw theirs. Dominic was seated, contained, with the expression of a man watching a play he had written reach its final act. Solomon looked at Dominic first. A long, level look that carried 23 years of complicated history. Obligation, resentment, genuine feeling, and something that might have been a wordless acknowledgement that this was always where the road ended. Then he looked at his boys. "Close the door," Eren said quietly. Solomon closed it. "Is it true?" Kael said. He still had not turned around. Solomon looked at the back of his head, at the set of his shoulders, at the arm that ended below the wrist, at the 25 years of a person he had watched being assembled from nothing and felt, in that moment, the full weight of what it meant to love something you were never supposed to keep. "Yes," he said. Kael turned around. Solomon had prepared for anger. He had prepared for violence, for the particular cold fury he had watched Kael construct and refine over 14 years of redirected purpose. He had prepared for shouting, and he had prepared for silence, and he had run through every configuration of this conversation in the dark hours of more nights than he could count. He had not prepared for the expression on Kael's face. It was not anger. It was not fury. It was the face of a boy. Not a 25-year-old man. Not the sharpened, capable, relentless person Kael had spent years becoming. But the boy underneath all of that. Looking at the only father he had ever known and trying to locate solid ground in a room where the floor had just dissolved. "From the beginning," Kael said. "You knew from the beginning." "Yes. He sent you." "He came." "Why?" Eren said from across the room. Not the why of accusation, the why of someone who genuinely needed the architecture of it, who could not move forward without understanding the structure of what had happened. "Why did you stay? You could have left. When we were 3, 4, 5, you could have walked away and no one would have stopped you." Solomon was quiet for a moment. "No one would have stopped me," he agreed. "That's true." "Then why?" Eren said. "Because by the time I thought seriously about leaving," Solomon said, "you were already mine, not his. Not your father's, it's mine. And I am aware of how that sounds given everything. I am aware that I have no right to that word after what I've just confirmed to you. But you asked me why, and that is the only honest answer I have." The room held that for a moment. It was Eren who asked the question that mattered. He unfolded his arms and took 2 steps forward and looked at Solomon with the direct, undeflectable gaze that had always been his particular gift. The ability to ask the thing everyone else was circling without cruelty but without mercy either. "Did you know he was going to kill them?" Eren said, "before it happened. Or did you find out after?" The room became very still. This was the question Solomon had feared most. Not because he didn't have an answer, but because the answer was the hinge everything else swung on, and once he said it, there was no configuration of the conversation that returned them to before. He looked at Eren steadily. "I knew there was a debt," he said. "I knew Dominic was going to collect it. I did not know what form the collection would take." He paused. "I found out the night he called me, when he told me what had happened and what he needed me to do. And you did it anyway," Kael said. "I did it anyway." "Why?" Kael said. "And don't tell me it was because you owed him. I want the real answer." Solomon looked at him for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and removed a folded envelope, old. The paper slightly yellowed at the edges, sealed with tape that had been applied carefully over what looked like an original wax seal long since broken and resealed. "Because your father asked me to," he said. Complete silence. "Marcus Vales and I grew up together," Solomonton said. "We were close before Dominic, before any of this. When Marcus borrowed the money, he told me. When he knew he couldn't repay it, he called me. He didn't ask me to save him. He knew it was past that. He asked me to make sure his boys were looked after by someone who would actually look after them." He held out the envelope. He wrote it down. The night Dominic took him, he wrote it all down. What he knew, what he feared, and what he was asking me to do. Dominic never found the letter because Marcus gave it to me before they took him. Not to hide from Dominic, Kael stared at the envelope. "To give to you," Solomon said, "when you were ready." Neither brother moved for a long moment. Then, Kael crossed the room and took the envelope from Solomon's hand and stood holding it with his one hand and looked at it the way people look at things they have needed for a very long time and are now afraid to open. From his chair, Dominic spoke for the first time since Solomon had entered. "The address," he said, looking at Kael. "The one Solomon gave you this morning. You should go there after." Kael looked up sharply. "It's where your father's grave is," Dominic said. "The real one. I had him buried properly. I don't expect that to mean anything to you. I'm telling you because you deserve to know where he is." He said it without theater, without the performance of remorse. Just a fact, offered plainly, by a man in the last hour of his power, placing the final pieces of a 23-year-old account on the table. "There's something else at that address," Solomon said quietly. "Something Marcus buried near the grave before Dominic's men came for him that night. I don't know what it is, he didn't tell me. Only that it was for you." Kael looked at his brother. Eren looked back at him. 23 years of silence had just filled a room to its ceiling, and neither of them had any idea yet what they were going to do about the two men still standing inside it. The decision about Dominic took 4 minutes. Not because it was simple, because both brothers he had, without discussing it, already arrived at the same place from different directions, and needed only enough time to confirm that the other was standing there too. Kael looked at Eren. Eren looked at Kael. The conversation that passed between them was the wordless kind, the twin frequency that had never required language. And what it said was this: "Killing him does not return anything we lost. It was not forgiveness." They were not there yet, and both of them were honest enough to know it. It was something colder and more considered. The recognition that Dominic Ren, stripped of his operation, his men, his empire of quiet violence, sitting in a gutted building at 67 with nothing left that functioned, was already living inside a punishment that a clean death would only interrupt. "You don't get to be finished," Kael said. "You get to keep going, with nothing." Dominic held his gaze for a long moment. Something moved in his expression that sat closer to respect than relief. "Understood," he said. Kael turned away and did not look back. Eren held Dominic's gaze 3 seconds longer, unhurried, final, then followed. They stood in the stairwell, the three of them, in the silence of people who have passed through something enormous and haven't yet found the words that belong on the other side of it. Kael had the envelope in his hand. He had not opened it. "How long?" he said. "Since you were 2, Solomon said. "My father asked you," Kael said. "He really asked you. He called me the week before Dominic came. He said he didn't think it was going to end well and he needed someone real to be there for his boys. Someone who would actually stay." A pause. "I almost said no." "Why didn't you?" Eren asked. "Because he was my oldest friend asking his last favor. And I have never been able to say no to someone standing at the edge of nothing left." "You lied to us," Kael said. "For 23 years. Yes, every day. The love was never a lie," Solomon said quietly. "I need you to know that even if you decide it doesn't matter." The assignment ended about 3 years in. Everything after was a choice. Kael looked at him for a long time. Then he opened the envelope. The letter was 2 pages in Marcus Vale's handwriting, slightly rushed, pressed hard into the paper the way people write when they are aware of time running out. Kael read it standing in the stairwell. Eren read it over his shoulder. Solomon stood apart and gave them the distance the moment required. When they finished, Kael folded the letter and held it against his chest with his eyes closed. Not performing grief, simply allowing something that had waited 23 years to finally arrive. Eren put his hand briefly on the back of Kael's neck, the oldest gesture between them. Kael opened his eyes and looked at Solomon. "He said you were the most stubborn man he knew," Kael said. His voice was different now, not warm, but the ice had shifted. "He said if anyone would actually stay, it was you, that you didn't know how to leave people." Solomon's jaw moved. He said nothing. "He was right," Eren said simply. They left the building at just past 2 in the morning. The address was a small plot on the edge of a neighborhood cemetery. Modest, maintained, marked with a simple headstone. Someone had been tending it for years. Kael looked at Solomon when he realized this. Solomon looked back without explanation, and Kael understood, without needing it said, that the tending had been regular and long and entirely without audience. Marcus Vale, beloved father. Kael stood before it for a long time. Near the base of the headstone, the ground had a quality that suggested old disturbance. Eren crouched and pressed his fingers into the soil. "There's something here," he said. They dug with their hands until Eren's fingers found the edge of something solid. A small sealed metal box, old but intact. Kael turned it over. On the bottom, scratched by a man in a hurry with no time left. "For Kael and Eren, the truth about Dominic, use it well." The brothers looked at each other. 23 years. A dead man's final move, buried patiently in the ground, timed for the moment his sons were ready to receive it. Marcus had known something about Dominic worth protecting. The secret he had whispered that last night. The thing that made Dominic pause and choose to spare 2 boys instead of leaving no witnesses. It had never been mercy, it had been insurance. And Marcus, even at the end, had made sure his sons held the policy. Kael stood, held the box, looked at his father's grave one last moment. Not peace. Not yet. But the first coordinates of it. "Let's go home," he said. They walked back to the car, Kael first, Eren beside him, Solomon a half step behind. Not reconciled, not restored, but together in the way of people who have survived the space and same fire from different positions and emerged into the same cold air on the other side. The rain arrived as they reached the car. Light at first, then steady. None of them ran for cover. Leave your comment below. I read everyone. If you haven't subscribed yet, this is your sign. There are more stories like this one waiting for you. Thank you for staying until the end. It means more than you know.